Good evening, I'm Faye Kwan. Our top story for tonight, Russia and Ukraine hold their first direct talks in 3 years. That's coming up on AWANI International. To start off, peace talks between Russia and Ukraine took place this morning in Istanbul, Turkey. The nearly 2-hour meeting marked the first time in 3 years that delegations from both countries were in the same room. The two nations are not known to have held direct talks at any level since the early weeks following Moscow's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Kiev is pushing for an unconditional ceasefire to end the conflict that has devastated Ukraine, while Moscow aims to address the conflict's root causes and revive failed 2022 talks. Notably absent from the talks were Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin. Another missing key figure was US President Donald Trump, who suggested that significant progress in peace talks were unlikely until he and Putin meet in person. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio also arrived in Istanbul earlier for a trilateral meeting with Ukrainian and Turkish officials. ASEAN has long championed a unified economic front, but when it comes to negotiating tariffs, especially with the US, critics argue that member states appear to act alone. With each ASEAN country subject to different tariff regimes, does it make more sense to negotiate bilaterally on their own or come together as a bloc with a collective leverage? Prof. Chandra Mugan Tangavelu, head of the Jeffrey Chia Institute on Southeast Asia, weighs in.
So US is not committing to a serious rule-based, market-based trading dimension itself. So where does this lead ASEAN? ASEAN still needs a coalition. ASEAN still needs the biggest trading framework itself. So how much does US trade to ASEAN actually account for? Maybe 20% of the total ASEAN trade with US. But there are 80% that is built on, 90% or 85% is built on this framework that is very important for us. So from a long, enduring, sustainable, and inclusive growth that we can create, it's the 85% that is based on a rule-based, market-based, and a coalition-based framework. So ASEAN follows this framework very carefully. That's the reason why on April 10, ASEAN under Malaysian chairmanship released the statement that fairly they believe that the negotiation from a coalition point of view, ASEAN point of view is very important. And they emphasize the importance of WTO, they emphasize the importance of rule and market-based trading area, which actually underpins how businesses need to do their work.
Chandra added that while some ASEAN countries have been pursuing bilateral tariff deals with the US, most prefer collective negotiations through ASEAN for better leverage.
So with the current framework, if bilateral FTAs and countries go on themselves and negotiate with that ASEAN, it doesn't actually help them because the whole framework of ASEAN, as I mentioned, is built on businesses participating in this framework. From either as a flying geese in the 70s and 80s, currently the global value chain itself. So bilaterally, if countries negotiate, it is an important thing, I guess, because countries are trying to mitigate the short-run effect of the trade diversion that US has put itself in terms of high tariff that of 39%, on Cambodia, and then 38% on Vietnam, and so on and so forth. On top of whatever the tariff line is, it's on top add-on component. So at that tariff rate, there's no trade at all. There's no margin for businesses to participate. So only 3 countries are bilaterally negotiating, and ASEAN already put up a statement that fairly there are many frameworks that can negotiate with US and bring US back into the negotiation table itself.
We'll be back with more after the break. Stay tuned.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini. Pastikan Astro AWANI menjadi pilihan anda, tidak kira di mana sahaja anda berada.
Welcome back. Donald Trump vows the U.S. will take care of the situation in Gaza, acknowledging that people in the territory are starving. His brief remarks come after concluding the first foreign tour of his second term, which saw him visiting several Gulf countries, but excluding key ally Israel.
We're looking at Gaza, and we got to get that taken care of. A lot of people are starving. A lot of people are, there's a lot of bad things going on. Okay? Thank you all very much.
A 2-month ceasefire between Israel and Hamas collapsed in March after Tel Aviv reimposed a total blockage on Gaza that aid agencies say has triggered severe food shortages. Israel cut off aid to Gaza on March 2nd, saying the decision was aimed at pressuring Hamas into concessions. However, the group insisted on Thursday that the restoration of humanitarian aid was the minimum requirement for resuming negotiations. It also warned that Gaza was not for sale just hours after Trump floated the idea of taking over the territory and turning it into a freedom zone under U.S. oversight.
In a striking shift that's reshaping Middle East politics, we're witnessing what appears to be an unprecedented cooling in relations between U.S. President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Just months into his second administration, Trump has notably excluded Israel from his latest international tour of the Gulf states, a decision that breaks decades of diplomatic tradition. Even more surprising, the president who once scrapped the Iran nuclear deal is now pursuing direct negotiations with Tehran, reportedly blindsiding his Israeli counterparts. For an analysis on this diplomatic pivot, we turn to Associate Professor Syed Han from Wayne State University.
It definitely is a bit premature to then posit whether this is going to be a long-term strategy for the United States as a whole, and even for that matter for President Trump himself. But at this very moment, we do see a substantial shift. One of these seems to be perhaps based on a very personal level between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump. While there are the usual platitudes and while there are the usual posturings between the American president and the Israeli prime minister, which is more of a matter, it seems, of custom and tradition than anything else, now we see a bit of a cooling off. And perhaps a lot of this may be motivated and directed more because of President Trump's ego, feeling as though Netanyahu has been playing him, taking advantage of him, something that someone of Trump's personality will not abide. Whatever the reasons might be, it seems as though there is a bit more frost on the relationship. We find that reporting in the United States indicated that the former National Security Advisor, Michael Waltz, was removed from that position ostensibly because he was too closely aligned with Netanyahu, particularly in calling for military strikes on Iran. Now, it seems as though Trump does not want that. He, in fact, has said even on this current trip in several different overtures that he is seeking some kind of a negotiated settlement with Iran, using diplomacy as the proverbial carrot and moving away from the stick, so to speak, that had been employed for so long. Now, of course, the irony is not lost that it is Trump himself who took the United States out of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, also known as the Iran nuclear deal, when he came to office in his first term, perhaps more out of a sense of personal animus to its architect, former President Obama, than anything else. But now we find that Trump is in fact using a similar playbook of appealing to the regime in Iran to reach a negotiated settlement, trying to offer them sanctions in lieu of the pledge not to develop a military nuclear program. And it seems as though that kind of direct negotiation, as well as the direct negotiation that Trump has been engaged with regarding Hamas blindsided Israel and particularly Netanyahu, who expects, as have most Israeli prime ministers, to be advised and to be apprised of what Washington is planning on doing. And in fact, in many cases, having the right reserved for objection or even refusal of such policies. It also indicates that the Trump administration seems to be more airtight, that there are not the leaks that would tip off Israel about these policies. Waltz was seen as being the problematic individual, and therefore it seems as though he was removed for that reason. But it is unprecedented that a U.S. president making a trip to the region is completely keeping Israel off the list of destinations, whether stopping there first or stopping there in this case at all. Is quite surprising and seems to indicate, as I said before, definitely a chilling effect between the United States and Israel.
U.S. President Donald Trump's recent Middle East tour highlights a growing shift in American foreign policy, one increasingly shaped by the region's rising influence. Beyond traditional diplomacy, Gulf states, particularly the UAE, are asserting themselves in the global tech arena, with Abu Dhabi's early investment in AI, including a dedicated AI ministry, positioning the country as a regional leader. What does this mean for global power dynamics and the future of technological leadership? We put forth that question to Associate Professor Syed Khan of Wayne State University.
I think it's interesting that President Trump visited Riyadh first. One can go ahead and make certain assumptions that Saudi Arabia is the largest country out of the Gulf Cooperation Council. His very close ties to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS, suggest that this would be then the obvious destination. But when it comes to enhanced investment, we also see then that Riyadh now appears to have an inside track. It has pledged, and the Washington establishment, as well as the United States more broadly through its entrepreneur class, seems to be very interested in supporting the development of Saudi Arabia's tech sector, particularly artificial intelligence. That, until now, seemed to have been within the exclusive domain of Abu Dhabi. In fact, the United Arab Emirates created a new precedent by establishing a ministry of AI a few years ago. So it had already the infrastructure in place and perhaps was really positioning itself to be that hub for advanced technology and particularly for AI. And now I think that that is a question that's a little bit more up in the air, that Saudi Arabia, with its far more vast resources, seems to now be looking to have that be perhaps one of its crowning features and assets. The fact that the president announced that while there's going to be probably $1 trillion in investment from the Gulf states to the United States, 600 billion of that, so 60%, is coming just from Saudi Arabia. So when it comes to the mathematics of it and the economics of it, it looks like the rivalries between Riyadh and Abu Dhabi and Doha are taking on interesting dimensions now, and perhaps Riyadh, as I said before, has the inside track on this particular issue as well.
That report wraps up AWANI International for tonight. Stay tuned for our reports on the rivalries, strategies, and the shifts behind the power affairs driving the new global order. Visit international.astroawani.com for more, and be sure to follow our social media accounts at Power Affairs. That's all for now. I'm Faye Kwan. Thank you for watching, and good night.